All right, let's dive in. Today, we are exploring the world of lipids, a group of molecules that are, absolutely essential to life, but also, let's be honest, pretty misunderstood. We're going to break down their structure, what they do, and why they are so incredibly important for everything, from our energy levels to the actual cells that make us who we are. Okay, let's get into it.
So let me ask you something. When you hear the word fat or lipid, what's the first image that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's probably butter or cooking oil, or maybe just a word on a nutrition label we're told to avoid. But I promise you, the scientific reality is so much bigger, so much more diverse, and frankly, way more fascinating than that. And that massive variety is what brings us to our first section, which I like to call the lipid identity crisis. Because here's the thing, unlike other big biological molecules, lipids are defined not by what they're made of, but by how they behave, specifically by what they refuse to do.
So this is it. This is the one rule that unites every single lipid out there, from the wax on a leaf to the cholesterol in our bodies. They do not dissolve in water. Just think about a bottle of salad dressing, right? That separation of oil and vinegar, that's it. That's the defining feature of a lipid in action. They're hydrophobic, which literally means water-faring.
And here's the other part of that identity crisis. You know how proteins are basically just long chains of amino acids, snapped together like beads on a string? And carbs are just chains of sugars? Well, lipids throw that rulebook right out the window. They don't have a single, repeating building block. And that freedom from structure is exactly what allows them to be so incredibly diverse.
So if they aren't these neat, repeating chains, then how are most of them built? Well, let's meet the two key components that team up to create a ton of the most important lipids that we have in our bodies.
Okay, on the left you've got glycerol. The easiest way to think of this little guy is as the backbone, or the anchor. It's the sturdy piece everything else attaches to. And then on the right you have the fatty acids, these long hydrocarbon chains that act as the tails. It's the combo of this one specific backbone and all these different possible tails that creates so much variety.
So now that we know our building blocks, we can start to explore the huge, sprawling lipid family tree. And for our purposes, we can really think of it as having three main branches.
And here's our little roadmap. You've got simple lipids. These are the fats and oils we all know. Then you have compound lipids, which are basically simple lipids with some extra stuff attached, giving them totally new powers. And finally, there are derived lipids, like cholesterol. Now, for this explainer, we're really going to focus on the first two because they're the key to understanding energy and structure.
Let's kick things off by looking at how the different shapes of these lipids make them the perfect architects for building our bodies, and also the perfect power plants for running them.
First up in the simple lipids category is the superstar, the triglyceride. The name tells you everything you need to know. Tri for the three fatty acid tails, and glyceride for that glycerol backbone they're all attached to. This is pretty much the main form of fat in our food, and it's how we store energy. And whether it's a solid fat like butter or a liquid oil, well, that all comes down to the shape of those tails, which we're going to get to in just a minute.
So what's their job? Well, first and foremost, they are the body's ultimate long-term energy reserve. They pack way more punch, more than double the energy per gram than carbs do. They also form a layer of insulation under our skin to keep us warm, and they provide this crucial cushioning for our vital organs. Okay, now let's check out the compound lipids, and specifically phospholipids. These things are a total game changer. So you've still got the glycerol backbone and fatty acid tails, but one of those tails gets swapped out for a phosphate group. And this gives the molecule a split personality. It now has a hydrophilic head that loves water, and those hydrophobic tails that still hate it.
And this love-hate relationship with water, well, it's pretty much the secret to life as we know it. See, when you put these phospholipids in water, they automatically arrange themselves into this beautiful double layer, a bilayer, with their water-fearing tails tucked safely inside and their water-loving heads facing out. This structure, this is the cell membrane. It's the intelligent barrier that surrounds every single one of your cells. Mind-blowing, right?
But here's the thing. Not all fats are created equal. And this is where we get to the plot twist. Because tiny, almost invisible changes in the chemical shape of those fatty acid tails can have absolutely enormous consequences for our health.
So here's the fundamental difference. Saturated fats are saturated with hydrogen, which makes their tails perfectly straight and rigid. Think of them like little building blocks that can stack together really tightly. That tight packing is why they're solid at room temperature, like butter. Unsaturated fats, though, have a double bond that creates a permanent kink or a bend in their tail. These bent molecules just can't pack together neatly, so they stay fluid and liquid, like olive oil. Now, let's zoom in even closer on that bend. A natural, healthy, unsaturated fat has what we call a cis configuration. That's the good kind of bend. But through some industrial processing, you can create trans fats. Now, they're still unsaturated, but their shape is artificially straightened out. So they start to act like a saturated fat inside the body. And that's what's been strongly linked to all sorts of negative health issues. It's almost the same molecule, but that one little change in shape has a huge biological impact.
And one last thing, it's super important to know that our bodies can't actually make every type of fat we need. Some of them, like the famous omega-3s, are called essential for a reason. We have to get them from our diet for things like brain health. Other fats are non-essential, which just means our body is clever enough to build them from other pieces when it needs to.
So, let's bring this all home. From a simple dislike of water all the way down to the subtle geometry of a single chemical bond, we've seen how lipids are truly the unsung architects of our biology.
So what are lipids really? They're our long-term energy storage. They provide the fundamental structure of our cells, they help our nerves communicate, they protect us with insulation and cushioning. They are, in a single word, indispensable.
And really, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Chemistry dictates shape, and shape dictates function. Getting a handle on these tiny molecular details isn't just some abstract science lesson. It is the absolute key to understanding our own bodies and our own health.
So I'll leave you with a final thought. The next time you're at the grocery store and you look at a food label, when you see saturated fat versus unsaturated fat, you now know the secret behind those words. You know about their shape, you know what that means for how they work. How is that going to change the way you see the food you eat?